So we are getting new indications that, as many have said before, Israel appears to have destroyed everything in Gaza except for Hamas. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. We're getting lots of new red triangle videos from Hamas on a near daily basis. You can see here, this, infamously, this is their targeting, showing they're still able to operate in various parts of the Gaza Strip, including, we know that there have been IDF casualties, and we'll get to that in a moment, in the northern Gaza Strip, where they had already gone in and completely annihilated, supposedly declared mission accomplished. But guess what? You didn't destroy Hamas. You left a complete vacuum. And so, surprise, surprise, Hamas is filling that vacuum. And also, surprise, surprise, when you murder and slaughter a bunch of civilians, kids, women, destroy homes, hospitals, schools, etc., guess what? The ideology that fuels Hamas, you are doing nothing but pour gasoline on that ideology. So let's put this up on the screen. This is incredible. From Politico, Biden admin openly hammering Israel's military strategy in Gaza. They got a bunch of quotes both on and off the record from Pentagon leaders who are saying there's no total victory against Hamas. That's quote unquote unlikely. You have another individual who says not only do you have to actually go in and clear out whatever adversary you're up against, you have to go in, hold the territory, then you got to stabilize it. If that doesn't happen, it allows your adversary then to repopulate in areas if you're not there. So that does make it more challenging for them as far as being able to meet their objective, being able to militarily destroy and defeat Hamas. Those comments followed others by Tony Blinken, who last week predicted the eventual withdrawal of Israeli forces could leave a vacuum that's likely to be filled by chaos, by anarchy, and ultimately by Hamas again. This is like preschool level. Like, it was so easy to see this and was foreseen and predicted even by people like us who are not military experts. Jocko was talking about this like 3 days into the Israeli offensive that they were making. If they actually wanted to target Hamas, this was the exact wrong way to go about it. Of course, that was never the actual goal. That was the goal sold to the Israeli public and the U.S. public and the world. Never the actual goal. The actual goal has always been complete and utter annihilation. Some other incredible quotes from this article, though. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. They say, although Hamas communications and military abilities have been degraded, only 30 to 35% of its fighters, those who were part of Hamas before October 7th, have been killed. And about 65% of their tunnels are still intact, according to U.S. intelligence. Let's put the next piece up on the screen. Biden officials have also become increasingly concerned that Hamas has been able to recruit during wartime thousands over the last several months. That has allowed the group to withstand months of Israeli offensives, according to a person familiar with U.S. intelligence. So honestly, Saagar, when you look at these numbers, that they've only, and this is according to U.S. intelligence, killed 30% of Hamas fighters, that Hamas has been able to recruit thousands more fighters during this time, which, again, it was obvious that the Israeli offensive here was only going to make people more likely to take up the Hamas ideology of armed resistance and also actively join Hamas. When you put those two numbers together, it's reasonable to ask whether they have degraded Hamas's numbers at all.
Yeah, and what's especially frustrating is that all of this was obvious to anybody. And I think, look, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but it's like basically Abai came up with Iraq and Afghanistan covering the Pentagon. And so all of the people who came up and really took over the Pentagon during the counterinsurgency movement knew this from the very beginning. That's part of the reason Jocko was able to identify that.
Yeah.
I will point here to General Joseph Votel, who was a great general. He was the head of the U.S. Central Command during the fight against ISIS, covered him extensively at the time, had special operations access, and here's what he says, quote, "Everybody gets the fact that you have to destroy Hamas, but then what? What's the plan to take care of the 2.5 million Palestinians? What is the plan to deal with the remainder of Hamas fighters? It seems incomplete. I don't think they have communicated or have thought through that as well as they would have hoped that they would have." Now, you're couching that in very friendly language, but this is obvious and has been, and I will point again to the quotes from General Petraeus, from all of his staff that was involved in Iraq. They are repeating the exact same mistakes that the United States did in its war in Iraq. And again, let's not forget, it took some 2 years for the full-blown insurgency to happen. And even 3 years, some might argue, for the actual civil war to heat up to the point where most people in America would pay attention. We are watching this, and that's why those videos matter so much, because what do you see? Guerrilla warfare freedom of movement, using the ability to move in and out of the rubble, disguise yourself amongst the civilian population, and hit the occupying force wherever it is, even if they have superior military technology. And as long as you have the civilian population on your side, or at the very least you're able to recruit a ton of people from there, you are going to win just because you can outlast the other ones. They cannot, by definition, kill all of you. It's just not possible. And, you know, I would point again to in here is that the very top of our military command is now outwardly saying this, including our new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The reason why is we are the ones who are paying these bills now. This is what we're going to talk about with Ken. You know, our pier has been a disaster. We've spent $500 million on it. We've barely gotten any aid. The plan from the Israelis, from the Saudis, and all of that is to ensnare the United States, CENTCOM, and all of the soldiers and command officials who came up in Iraq to try and repeat that experiment in Gaza this time around and basically, you know, get bought off by the Israelis. So we have to resist this at every turn possible. And, you know, you can read this very clearly. These are sober-minded individuals who have extensive experience fighting these exact type of militants, and they're looking at this and they're seeing a full-blown nightmare.
Yeah.
They could see it clearly.
It's not like it went all that well when we tried to do it either, but there are some
it worked for a bit. Yeah.
But, I mean, listen, if you actually are if you are actually serious about destroying, quote-unquote, Hamas, even if you do kill 30, 50, 60% of their fighters, if you're fueling the ideology, then you are going to see them bounce back tenfold. And so what would really actually degrade Hamas? It's not a hard question to answer because we've seen over time when Hamas has been more or less popular. Hamas is at its most popular at times, frankly, like this, when peace seems impossible, especially through nonviolence and diplomatic negotiations, when there's absolute fury at your treatment at the hands of the Israelis. Those are the factors that fuel and bolster Hamas. Nothing has been a greater gift to Hamas, which I think it's true, doesn't really care about, you know, civilian life and is perfectly willing to sacrifice Palestinians in the service of their cause. Nothing has bolstered them more than this response. What has diminished Hamas popularity is when there is an actual possibility and real prospect of peace. So if you were serious about undermining Hamas and destroying the legitimacy of their ideology and ability to recruit, you would go in the polar opposite direction of what Israel has done. And this will be relevant in the next topic we discuss as well, which is recognition of Palestinian statehood. And there's all this conversation, oh, this is a gift to Hamas, a gift to terrorists, et cetera. Quite the opposite. Actual negotiations towards peace, nothing would undercut the Hamas ideology more than a real prospect of peace and something approaching a just resolution. To the point earlier about how we know it's not just, you know, their Hamas propaganda videos, but they are inflicting casualties and exacting a real cost on the occupation forces. Let's put this up on the screen. You had 3 IDF soldiers who were killed in northern Gaza, fighting northern Gaza. Those soldiers, they were killed in a variety of ways. There was one who was killed as a result of an explosive device that went off inside a building. A reservist and a combat officer were also seriously wounded in that other incident. The other 2 were killed by sniper fire, and another soldier from that same division was also seriously wounded. So this is in northern Gaza. You have, at the same time, this now massive action in Rafah, which, you know, anyone looking at this would definitely classify it as major, even though the Biden administration doesn't. You've had almost 1 million Palestinians once again forcibly displaced from Rafah with nowhere safe to go. You have aid effectively completely cut off. We'll talk to Ken a little bit more about that. Absolutely dire situation, civilians still being killed. And, you know, to the point of, oh, well, why isn't there a plan for a day after? And why have they never, you know, laid out what their plan is for the day after? Well, there's certainly people who are in the, in the fold, who are cabinet ministers, who have said very plainly what their plan is. One of them being Ben Gvir, who is, one of the most psycho members of the Israeli of Bibi Netanyahu's cabinet. Let's put this up on the screen. I'll read you what he said recently, indicating that he wants to occupy all of Gaza with Jewish settlement. He says, but that's not enough. One more step, which is the most important step, immigration. Yes, I'm not saying all of them, by the way. And then he says, explain to me. To go back to the settlements we occupied during the war, but not only that, you have a lot more to occupy. And if there's an emigration of hundreds of thousands who will leave, you will enter with more and more people. And the questioner says, you will be the first to live there? And he says, I will be very happy to live there. Yes, why not? So not only do you have, we're going to resettle the entire Gaza Strip, we're going to ethnically cleanse it of Palestinians. I personally am interested in living there. This is the goal of, powerful elements within the Israeli government. This is what they have always wanted. This is what they've said very clearly. For some reason, U.S. Politicians pretend they don't hear this, pretend they don't know that this is a very clear goal of a very important part of the Bibi Netanyahu coalition. And I think that Mearsheimer is right, that the original goal of Bibi himself was this ethnic cleansing, which hasn't really succeeded, and so then shifted to just all-out annihilation. The writing is on the wall as far as that's all concerned.
This is why I also think a government change in Israel would be profound. Is to even getting people outside of that, like outside of the government, and even forcing diplomatically their hand to try and to form some sort of post-war strategy is definitely still better of an alternative than the current situation. Because Bibi himself refuses to rule. For example, in a CNN interview, he rules out. He says there will be no Israeli settlement in Gaza. But then you have members of his own cabinet, which are out there saying it, on top of many of the previous things that he has said. I'm not saying Benny Gantz is an angel or any of these other things, but if you want to look at how to actually move forward, I think it's pretty clear that the current situation is unsustainable, both militarily, strategically, and domestically for the current situation, which doesn't necessarily mean that they will change anything. They will probably still continue.
When you say it's not sustainable, what do you mean by that?
Oh, sustainable as in, so you can't, continue so basically they don't have the military capacity to pull off, a complete annihilation. It's literally impossible. They could try, but, given international pressure and all that, not going to happen. Same time in terms of strategically, you see the ICC charges, international isolation, growing challenges even here at home. Even Nancy Pelosi says, hey, Bibi, don't come and speak to Congress right now. So you have a big problem in terms of your biggest ally. And then domestically, you have got a basic problem with your domestic coalition. You've got the hostage issue, which continues to blare in your face, and huge protests that are there at home with a viable opposition leader who is sitting there getting more popular by the day. So on all three fronts, you have a serious issue. That doesn't mean it won't sustain for a long period, but I still think it's a big problem.
I hope you're right. I'm just not sure because we also have an election coming up and, Donald Trump administration isn't even going to do the performative hand-wringing that the Biden administration occasionally does. They're not going to have those quote-unquote tough conversations. They're going to give them everything they want when they want it and go above and beyond because that's the position that the whole Republican Party has staked out, Trump included, that Biden hasn't been supportive enough of Israel. So can they sustain it through the election? I mean, any of the previous, when we had that minute of them saying, oh, we paused a shipment, it was this big deal, that's all gone now. 1 million Palestinians have been displaced from Rafah. This supposed red line has been, more than crossed. And now all you see is just back to the bear hug. So I don't see any sign that the Biden administration is planning to change their policy orientation towards Bibi and his government. I don't see that they're willing to do anything other than, these tough conversations behind the scenes, really, to try to effectuate an outcome, which we know isn't going to do anything. Can they wait it out till the Trump administration comes in? Do they really, over the long term, the fact that they're a pariah nation, I think that bites and that's going to be a problem for them. But in terms of sustaining, this horrible status quo where people are just dying and dying and dying and nothing seems to really change, I don't know. I'm afraid they can sustain that.
The only thing that I have going forward is that Trump hates Bibi because he congratulated Joe Biden on the election. So it could be his own pettiness gets in the way. Remember, he's attacked him in every interview that he's been given on the state of Israel.
I can't see him going against Israel. I mean, think of how many of his major donors are extremely pro-Israel. Think of where the Republican Party establishment is. Think of the comments that he's made about, he's very clearly in the camp now of Biden hasn't done enough for Israel. So I can't see that. So, in terms of the Israeli political pressure, again, it's not like the Israeli public opposes the war. The rub is feeling accurately like Bibi doesn't actually care about the hostages. He doesn't. Obviously they could have had a hostage deal that could have been secured. So perhaps that pressure ultimately amounts to something. But I don't know. He's a very wily operator. He's held on to power this long, and he's certainly improved his prospects of being able to hang on to power a lot longer. And then the other question is like, would Benny Gantz or whoever really be that much different? Yoav Gallant, who's, also facing arrest warrants from The Hague and is the one who announced the siege, and we're going to treat them like human animals because that's what they are. He's also considered a quote-unquote moderate, so it's also an open question if you did get a governmental change, how much it would really amount to.
True.
I don't know. Like I said, I hope you're right. I'm not sure.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.